Hello, everyone. This is the Places to Grow peer learning event. Places to Grow is a comparably new program. Places to Grow is a catalyst for excellence in early childhood development, active in Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. And we are working on bringing different actors, different stakeholders to improve the early childhood development system, ecosystem in these three countries with the help of many partners who are part of this program. If you're interested in the program, you can go to the placestogrow.eu. Maybe Teresa, you can post the link to the website, and then you can see more information about this program. And we are organizing such events where our partners are sharing their insights, their experience working in early childhood development or any other field that is related to early childhood development. And today we are very happy to have the Milan Šimečka Foundation from Slovakia and the colleagues from the Milan Šimečka Foundation, namely Veronica, Zuzá, and Andrej. I will ask them in a second briefly to introduce themselves and what they are doing at Milan Šimečka Foundation. They will present their recent research on how to increase the public's support for inclusive policy, which in my lame words is about communication, like how to communicate well to get the local community, the mayor, any stakeholder on your side to move the ecosystem, to move the system into a more inclusive early childhood development. So this is the topic or the angle that we want them to present about their research. And I would like to ask now the Zuzá, Veronica, and Andrej to introduce themselves and just tell us who they are and what they're doing at Milan Šimečka. So maybe Zuzá, you can start, and then Veronica and Andrej, if that's okay.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to see you all at this event. I'm Zuzá Bošelová, and I work as the project coordinator and researcher in Milan Šimečka Foundation. And my great topic is how to support the inclusion at local level in Slovakia. It's the main interest in the work for me, and also the great challenge for me. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Zuzá. Veronica?
Hi, Hi everyone. My name is Veronica. I'm the director of Milan Šimečka Foundation for 2 years now, and I have background in NGO, so nonprofit organizations, as well as youth and research and training. And I joined 2 years ago because the importance of the topics that Zuzka mentioned, namely inclusion and diversity, were very dear to me. And so in the foundation, these are the topics that we cover. And I'm happy that with most of you, at least I know the faces, and we've met also in physical settings, but it's great seeing your faces today in the online world. And we're excited for really interesting, hopefully also interesting for you, discussions of the research. And hereby I give the word to Andrej, who's our board member as well. And he's a researcher at the university here. So Andrej, if you see us.
Hello everyone, nice to meet and see all of you. Thank you, Veronica, for introducing. So I think I just need to say I work at Comenius University in Bratislava Faculty of Social and Economic Sciences, and I think that's about it.
Thank you very much. Very brief, very efficient. I like it. Okay, before we get started with the presentation of the research, of the outcome of the research, a brief information about the agenda, how this meeting is going to go. So in a second, Andre will deliver you the insights of this research. You can post questions into the chat as Andre goes, or you can, just think about questions to ask at the end of the presentation, because after the presentation we will have a Q&A, all of us in this main room. Yeah. After that, we have 3 topics related to this research. And we will present you these 3 topics, and based on these 3 topics we will create 3 breakout rooms, and you can choose which breakout room do you want to go and have a discussion with a smaller group about that certain topic. We will tell you more how it will work logistically, technologically, once we get there. And once you had your discussion in the breakout room, we will come back together in the main room, and we will ask the facilitators or the colleagues from the Milan Šimečka Foundation, who will be, each of them will be in one of the rooms, to give a brief summary of what you have discussed in that room, maybe any interesting insights or questions, maybe even proposals for collaboration, because this is what Places to Grow is looking for always, and supports collaboration between stakeholders, between actors working towards the common goal of making the life of children better through early childhood development. And then we will finish, cry and wave goodbye, and hope for the next event eagerly, right? So I expect that from everyone, the crying especially. Anyway, sorry. Okay, without any further ado, if there are no questions about the agenda, okay, then I would like to ask Andre to deliver his presentation of the research.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about research I and my colleagues, we did together with Milan Šimečka Foundation a couple of years ago. I would like to explain something before I even begin, so there is no misunderstanding. First of all, I'm not going to talk about, some hard truths. I'm going to talk about findings which usually, work or are valid with a certain probability, but I'm not going to say that this is black and this is white, and if you do this, this exact thing will happen as a consequence, because the social world doesn't work like that, and and we don't find that we don't do research with findings like this. That's first thing. Second thing is that our research, it was not about early childhood development. It was more about housing policies or social assistance programs. So what I expect maybe you to do to understand what I'm talking about as some kind of inspiration to think about your own topic, to think about early childhood development, which can be very similar to social housing policies or social assistance policies when it comes to people who are marginalized in Slovakia due to their socioeconomic status and their perceived Roma ethnicity. So that's the second thing. And third thing is that I'm an academic, and usually even in English or in Slovak, but I speak the language which is called academies. In Slovak, it's akademičtina. And sometimes I have problems to put certain concepts into a language which is easily accessible and intelligible for people who are not working on the same subject as I am. So please, if you experience any difficulty with any of the concepts I'm using, or I under-explained something, raise your hand or interrupt me even, so we can address it immediately, so we don't forget about it. Okay, is this clear? And of course, I'm going to show you. I'm going to share with you a policy brief which we put together with Milan Šimečka Foundation and CSAM, which is a peer agency, and we are free to share this. So if you ask Veronica or Zuza to share this with you, or even I can send it with you. I mean, send it here, so you can all download it. And in this policy brief, we actually try to be very, very, very comprehensible, very intelligible to even to people who were not part of that research and who did not study the literature and so on. But no, okay. So without further ado, I already spoke enough of preliminaries. I'm going to share this policy brief. Just let me know whether you see it. Do you see it?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
On
visible.
the screen.
Okay. So as you can see, I'm going to show you these key findings and policy recommendations. There are 3. And I'm going to go one after another. If you have any questions, please let me know. And since I'm presenting and I'm seeing this kind of like the same big screen as you are, maybe if you want to interrupt me or ask me anything, please do that by sound. So because I'm not sure whether I will be seeing any hands which is being raised. Okay. So, but maybe I can just switch to the regime. So first of all, I mean, and part of this research is already published, part of this we are writing up, but one of the first things we were trying to focus on is the language which is being used in order to describe people who are disadvantaged. And usually the problem with this language is that it is heavily centered around community. So in Slovakia, we have so-called marginalizované rómske community. And there is a whole literature in social psychology which basically says that if you are referring to people as communities instead to as individuals or groups which are composed of individuals, people have problems to see these communities in human terms as compared to individuals or groups of individuals. So we did this research and actually we really found out that when you describe a situation in which a community or an individual or a group of individuals go through some hard time, you know, and they need help, people are more willing to help them if these people are described not as a community, but either as an individual, as a concrete human being, or as a group of individuals. And why is this important? It is important because of a lot of the documents, a lot of the policy talk, even in NGO circles, you know, among NGO people, is centered on communities. We always refer to communities because it's a very kind of like convenient shorthand, but we don't use this people-centric language that much. Or at that time when we were doing it, it was not a rule. And what I would like to stress in this point number 1, referring to people rather than communities, is to try to adopt as much as possible people-centric language instead of community-centered language. So when we talk about disadvantaged people in Slovakia, who some of them can be Roma, but you know, this is even kind of like a more difficult question in Slovakia because a lot of the people we call as members of marginalized Roma communities, there are some of them who don't identify as Roma. You know, like, I mean, they may be poor, they may have a really severe socioeconomic disadvantage, but when you ask them how they identify, they may identify as Slovak, as Hungarian, but not as Roma, you know? So many times this identification comes from outside. So why? So again, I mean, this is kind of like an additional reason to consider referring to these people as individuals or as people. Okay, so and again, I think maybe it's a worth of discussion, you know, like even when we will be talking about this early childhood development, is that that referring to people as individuals or referring to people as people, and especially in the case of people is a much kind of like a more inclusive, more encompassing category. So anyone actually feels like people, you know. So, and especially with this early childhood development, I was thinking that a lot of the policies, I think people can have a, you know, problem to support it because they don't feel like it's about them, it's about their children. So using this language of people, you know, because there can be many disadvantaged kids in Slovakia whose parents don't consider themselves as Roma, but still they would qualify for many probably of the programs you are working on. But this is, I think, for kind of like a further discussion. So people or individuals instead of communities. And again, if you look at it more closely, there is a lot of research for individuals. It's called psychic numbing. So people respond much more positively to one concrete person and their suffering and see them in more human terms as some kind of statistics, you know, as 100, you know, people. There is a lot of research being done, for example, on humanitarian help for countries of the global south, like countries in Africa and so on. Okay, are there any questions? Something I would need to clarify with this point number 1. I mean, it's not a rocket science, but still, maybe some of the terms I used, it was not clear, or the message I wanted to send. Okay, good. Okay, so the key finding and policy recommendation number 2 is recognize and appeal to common core values. And again, part of the research we did, it was about, we wanted to find out when people are making decision about distribution or about allocation or redistribution. So taking some, for example, some public funds and distributing it among the citizens. This is usually for people, for many people or most of the people, a question of some kind of fairness, you know, or justice, you know. So, and when people make these decisions, they prefer a certain type of fairness arguments to other types of fairness arguments, you know. And in our research, usually we were working with people from Slovakia who are so-called representatives, samples representative of Slovak population. So it's usually 1,000 people from the whole of Slovakia. So we had several studies with such samples of people. But we had also 2 very special samples. We had one sample which was composed of inhabitants of one Slovak village in the northeast of Slovakia. And this village is, you know, like peculiar because, you know, it's half Slovak, half Roma. So we were able kind of like to also follow whether there are any differences in how Roma and Slovaks from that village or non-Roma see things, what kind of attitudes they have, what kind of their fairness principles they hold dear. And second sample, which I think is even kind of like a more interesting, is that, and this actually cost us a lot of money to put together, is that we had a, how would I say it, representative sample of Roma population from the whole of Slovakia, and it was 750 people. There are actually not that many opinion polls with 750 Roma people from Slovakia. As far as I know, we are the only ones, but maybe you can correct me. Because, and this is something to, I think, also to take into consideration, Roma people, they are so-called, or what is known in my field, they are so-called understudied or under-researched population. So usually when there is a public opinion poll in Slovakia or any other country, usually it studies what the members of majority think. Or if it is representative samples, there can be sometimes Roma, but definitely it's very rare, and usually it doesn't happen that they would represent the ethnic composition of that country, you know, because it's very difficult to do and so on. So we had these 2 samples, one from this village and the other one 750 people from the whole of Slovakia. And again, we were trying to compare, you know, like because in the village we found that that when it comes to these principles of fairness, Roma people in that village were different from non-Roma people. So for non-Roma people, what was most important principle of fairness was proportionality. you know. So basically it's this tit for tat. So if you do something, you can get something in return. You understand? Zásluhovosť, right? In Slovak. For Roma people, it was the need. It was the potreba. So those should get help who are in the greatest need. You understand? And we extrapolated from this that, okay, when it comes to principle of fairness, Roma and non-Roma populations are different. And of course, we were very cautious to generalize for the whole country. And thanks God for that, because with this large 750 people Roma sample from the whole of Slovakia, we actually found that it doesn't hold. That once you ask people, and you know, and I explain you why is this. Once you ask people about a hypothetical situation, as it was case in this with these 750 Roma participants and this one compared to representative sample of Slovak population, suddenly their fairness principles were very much aligned. They were very much similar to each other. But they were different at the level of this village in northeastern Slovakia. And we realized that one of the factors which might be responsible for this is self-interest, is that people answer this question about fairness differently when it is really related to them directly, when it really involves something they can get some kind of material benefit or reward from, as when compared to when they present them some hypothetical situation which has nothing to do with their real life. Okay, but the lesson from this is that that for the 750 Roma, this principle of proportionality, zásluhovosť, was actually also the one which they would support most, you know, in a very similar way as the representative sample of the general population of Slovakia. And again, if you want to communicate certain policy, and now we are talking about human values, we are talking about how people view fairness, how people view social justice. So I think it helps very much if we know what people hold dear and what people do not really consider important, because it's much easier to get support for something for which you know that it is being backed up by the values of these people, that they actually consider it to be fair and just. It's much easier to be, let's say, persuasive. It's much easier. It actually helps your arguments if you build it on a value which these people condone as on the value which these people are not so much sure about. Is this clear? I mean, yeah. Okay, good. So this is the second thing. So recognizing and appealing to common core values. And, you know, it's also important, I mean, to consider this because usually, you know, we are inclined to see the world in these ethnic terms, and we are inclined to see this kind of like some kind of essentialist that you think in a certain way because you are Slovak, or you think in a certain way because you are Roma. And what this research shows is actually that it's not that much, you know, this is not really a fact, you know. So this is kind of like our expectation. I would even say maybe a stereotype. And that actually this Roma population and non-Roma population, they are much more alike than, you know, than we would expect. So this is the second point. The third point is promote voluntary over compulsory participation. And again, this is something which is very interesting from the point of view that in Slovakia, and not only in Slovakia, because this actually is quite generalizable also to many other countries in the world, in which you have a certain categories of people who are receiving help from redistribution as a social assistance, social housing programs, and so on, and who at the same time can be labeled in some ethnic or even racial terms. So, for example, in the US, it will be African Americans, for example, right? And this research, not only from Slovakia and European countries, but also from around the world, it also shows that that these stereotypes people have, they are very important in how they think about, you know, like what kind of policies we should have. So, for example, in Slovakia, we ask people, you know, like two situations. And again, we ask people representative sample of general Slovak population, whether they would support an applicant for social housing, the one who wants to participate at this social housing project willingly, that this person wants to do it on their own accord, or who is forced to do it. So you can imagine which one do you think they would support more to get the social housing? Anyone? Okay, okay. So they will support, of course, the one more who is doing, who is participating at the social housing project on the construction of the social housing willingly, as opposed to the one whom you have to force. But here comes another question. We ask participants not about individuals, but we ask participants about policies. And we ask them whether they would support, which policy they would support more. Policy which, again, lets these recipients of the social housing, these marginalized Roma people, to participate willingly, voluntarily, or again, compared to policy which forces them to participate, which makes them to participate. So which of these policies do you think they would support more?
The second one.
Exactly. The second one, the one which forces them, And as you can see, at individual level, people support individual applicant, the one who is doing things voluntarily more, but at the level of policy, they support actually the policy, the repressive policy more, much more actually, And of course, and the obvious explanation for this is the stereotype, because people's expectations are that, these Roma people, you have to force them so they participate. You understand? And what I think our research made us think about is that, sorry, my colleague is just texting me through MS Teams. So what this research made us think about is that actually in order to get away, to leave, to exit this vicious circle of stereotypes, we actually should not support policies which force people to participate. I mean, and of course, there are many other reasons why we should not do this, but we are actually keeping the stereotypes alive, in the loop. If we support policies which are repressive, because they strengthen, like they reproduce the stereotype of so-called lazy Roma who have to be forced to participate, And again, here I have to say that when we compared the responses from Roma participants and non-Roma participants, we found that they are very much more alike, when it comes to supporting or choosing these individual participants, and when it comes to, supporting these policies. So even, even Roma would have this kind of like a stereotypical expectations that you have to force at the policy level, because that will be like the preferred policy option. But again, if we don't want to reproduce it, if we don't want to strengthen the stereotype of lazy Roma, we should really support policies which are open for active and voluntary participation. Not to mention the fact that in the last 2 or 3 years, there has been a lot of studies published which show that and actually, this is also something which might be kind of like a food for thought when you think about public support for early childhood development programs, is that once you show the people that instead of this poor individual who is not able to do anything with their life and who is in horrible conditions and needs outside help, our kind of like a natural thinking about this is that this is how we appeal. This is how we want to get support, because people will recognize the need and they will support it. But there is a lot of research, actually, it's not ours, it comes from researchers from other universities, but it shows that when you introduce any kind of like alternative version, someone who is in a dire situation, difficult conditions, but at the same time you are able to show that this individual, this person, this family, they are able actually to help themselves, to improve their situation with a little of outside help. This is actually which works much more for getting public support as the first as the first type, as the first scenario. Why? Because the second one, people recognize from outside that these people who are in a difficult situation, but were able to do at least a little bit something about it, they suddenly have agency. You know, they are the ones who are able to take action on their behalf and do something. So somehow people believe in the prospect of change for someone who can already show record for that, as for someone who cannot show anything, you know? So, and again, so this is related to this third point I was talking about. Okay, so I would stop now. I almost also looking at the time and so on. So I don't want to take much more, but if there are any questions or comments or anything which needs clarification or further discussion, please, now is the time.
Yes,
Yeah?
Shoshana.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I have a question considering the people-centric language. We in research also often use marginalized Roma communities, but we try to say people living in marginalized Roma communities, and I'm not sure if that is people-centric enough, but the reasoning behind it is that those marginalized Roma communities have very specific types of disadvantage related to that location, to the place of living, the segregation, and all the other aspects of disadvantage that stem directly from living in there. And I don't know if that is people-centric enough, or what should we enhance in order to gain more support? Thank you.
I think, Shoshana, this is a good question, and I think from the communication point of view, and I'm an academic, so actually I'm allowed to do these things, and actually even it's part of this academic language. But when you say people in marginalized Roma communities, that's almost like you are referring to certain people with one sentence. So I think in communication terms, this is not a good choice of. I mean, this is not a good wording because it takes us too much time, and it made me think. Like I never thought about it, but maybe we could do some research about that. Is that maybe we should call people in such a way which would help. For example, if we would talk about people who are trying to improve their situation or something like that, you know what I'm trying to say. I mean, it's not perfectly 100% descriptive, but it doesn't put the ethnic label on these people. It doesn't put the marginalization label on these people. Because as I understand it, calling people Roma, calling people marginalization can mean certain setbacks. And I'm not saying we should not call people Roma, we should not talk about marginalization, but I'm talking about when we want to get support for any public policies, from which these people should benefit, we should maybe think about, whether this is a good choice of words. So I'm sorry. Usually, in academia we don't have 100% exact answers for questions, but at least we can say that was a good question.
Thank you, Andrei. Hopefully it was in a way helpful, Shoshana. And yeah, just very briefly, so you will see at the bottom of your screen a hand. So if you have a question, please push that, and I will ask you once you are next. So right now we have Stano and then Zuza. Stano, please.
I guess I should let Zuza speak first because I saw she wanted to react to something that Andrei said, and I want to talk about something else. Yeah.
Okay.
Zuza, you are
muted.
So the problem I see is that we don't distinguish the situation of using the term MRK, and it is just political language, maybe very practical in policies and making these political decisions and writing the project. But this is the shortcut which is often used in the localities, in the field. And I think the problem, I see the problem of identifying the local people and the familiar person as the three letters of MRK. That's my maybe ethical point of view of this.
I think ethical point of view is very important, but on the other hand, like the language we use, it doesn't only describe the reality, but it also creates it. It constitutes it. Constitutes it. So I think it's important that we are meeting here, because I think it's vital that we recognize also the importance of the language, even this kind of like a small language tweaks we might use, like how it can lead to maybe a little bit different results. And trust me, I mean, this whole area of studying the language we use, we also now do it in relation to migration. And you will be surprised how also this migration discourse is full of terms which actually help people to dislike migrants, because, and again, I'm not saying it's all in the language, but what I'm saying is that sometimes what we can do is to be, let's say, more sensitive and to be, let's say, more cautious when it comes to using certain words and actually reproducing them. So I'm not saying we should abandon MRK, like marginalized Roma communities, but what I'm saying is that once we set on the task of getting the support for some of the policies, we should be aware of the fact that this MRK language doesn't serve our purpose, that it's actually, it's counterproductive, so.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the Merc language expression. Don't speak Merc to me. Okay. Stano and then Vlado, please.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, on this, I would like to share also a brief note that what I realized, like how the language is sometimes changing also, and the words that were not offensive are now offensive, or may turn into being offensive. So I don't think it's specific to acronyms or the language of marginalization, but let me use one example. Integrated is a good word, but because there were some children with like learning difficulties and so on, they were integrated into mainstream classes. At some point, being integrated meant like you have some disability, some learning disorder, something. So originally, like okay word, integrated, suddenly became something bad. And similarly, I think the word community is also at the local level with like Roma settlements is very often used as a bad word. Like he is from the community, like he lives in the village or he lives in the community, and the community in this sense means osada, like the isolated, marginalized Roma settlement or something, right? So I think, as much as you try to like find like politically correct, neutral words, they will easily get the negative connotation. And it may be much harder if we speak the, like, yeah, and I wanted to say like people language, but it's not even like people language. It, as long as you speak about Stano, you can't turn it into an offensive thing, right?
You can.
Okay, Andre can, right? but when you say like, yeah, like it can be anything, so yeah, like we've had many examples like that. But something else I wanted to ask Andre.
May I react just shortly to what you said, because I think very important is that actually this individualistic language in which you say, okay, this is for Mirka's child, or this is for Joško's daughter, this is for Marian's twins, so this is I think this is the language which, as you said, is very difficult to like I mean, it's very difficult to stereotype because you are using no, collective categories. You are talking about individuals, and what is important is, how inclusive is that? How many people, can be involved in that? How many families or children in your case? But I think this is very important because, and as you said, it's very difficult to have something against Tano. You are perfectly right. So once we talk about individuals, that's a kind of like that's the best option. And of course, sometimes it's impossible to do this, but I was not trying to talk about politically correct language. I was just trying to say that sometimes the language we use has consequences, and sometimes these consequences are against the very purpose why we use the language. That was it.
Yeah. No, thanks. But the other thing before I forget that I wanted to ask you, and I'm a bit confused about this, like compulsory and voluntary participation, because I understand like like people want that, people prefer if the participation is voluntary, because then they value it more. Like, it's not that, oh, they were forced to do that, but they did it voluntarily. On the other hand, like for like from the policymaker's perspective, I'm thinking, if I know that it's better for the policy to be accepted if it says participation is compulsory, then am I not, as a mayor, motivated to include compulsory participation, because then I will get higher support from my electorate for that?
Yes. As a politician, you definitely probably think in this sense, but as NGO worker, as activist, as academic, we should also talk to mayors about, and I understand it's very difficult to change their thinking about, like election cycle, that they want to be re-elected. So, but on the other hand, what will create this, they will just reproduce this challenge they still have to face. And I think what might help is, to show good examples, like in which this voluntary participation actually can turn things around, not the compulsory one. But as I said, it's not easy. And of course, that's completely another thing, like how these different social actors, what kind of different motivations they have. And of course, if someone's motivation is to get re-elected, they are not looking at it from the same perspective as, for example, we are. The people who are participating in this meeting. And I think that's a very valid question. And maybe that would require another kind of like a research on how to talk with this type of stakeholders. And of course, there might be also differences between mayors, because some of them are willing to take this risk, and they understand that reproducing stereotypes in the long run hurts their agenda, not helps their agenda, but probably there are not majority of those. So yeah, but that's again very good comment. But maybe one more thing is that I think some of you probably also talk to decision makers, people who put together or propose legislation and so on. And maybe this is also a kind of like to have this kind of like a mental note to remind those people that this compulsory and participatory, they are different. And even though one can have more public support at the policy level, it still kind of like reproduces the stereotypes, which again have very bad societal consequences.
Great, thank you, Andrei. Vlado?
Yes, I like to touch a little bit about the Mrk language. But there is a quite difficult question. We are on the phase that in Slovakia, at least, that MRK is, let's say, well-recognized term among the policymakers about the people who are more or less aware about this issue. But if you like to slightly change it, what was the proposal? What was your suggestion? How to let's say create something new? What is more acceptable in the point of view more individualized approach? Because MRK, it's everywhere in every state policy papers, and then this usage in the office of plenipotentiary of MRK. So how I understand that it's what you said, Andre, in the first point, but how to adjust, how to make the way out from this if it's already so well recognized finally, let's say, because 20 years ago it was much, I don't know, much less recognized. That's my question.
I think one of the solutions was mentioned by Shoshana. So you talk about people from MRK, and again it gets quite longer, but I think it's still better as to have just MRK, because MRK, it really takes the humanity out of, I mean, those people, those inhabitants, those, and there is a reason for that. And actually, in our research, we replicated and actually extended the research from which was first done in the US, then in Canada, and probably the way human psychology, it's the way the human psychology works, that if you mention community, for people it's more difficult to imagine concrete people behind community. It gets easier when you mention people, and it gets much easier if you mention individuals. And I know when it comes to talking about this, probably people of MRK would be an acceptable shorthand, but definitely not MRK, because then the kind of like you are really risking losing of this kind of like a humanity perception.
Okay, Zuza.
Yeah, maybe the last comment on this topic, but I think that important is to find some alternative and to be open to find them. We often using the wording, the Roma living in the conditions of social exclusion, for example, because the combination of social and ethnical is very important for us, or the people living in social inclusion and so on. I think that it's not the perfect term, but maybe we try to offer some alternative and use them in some context, of course. In local context, it's not important to refer to MRK, I think. So,
All right. Andrea, you want to respond on this?
Yeah, I think it was also a good comment from Zuza, because what I'm not suggesting that we use only one type of word. I mean, we can actually be quite flexible, and it really depends on the situation, whom we are speaking to, what's our purpose, you know, so we can be actually more creative and more flexible in this. And the last thing I want to be viewed as is some kind of language police, not at all. What I'm just saying is that I think it's good and it's worthwhile to realize that sometimes the language we use automatically because it's handy, you know, like we don't have to give it a second thought, that sometimes it can actually goes against our own aims, you know. So I'm asking only for that, and I'm not asking to abandoning MRK completely. It's just that in certain communication situations, it's probably not the best word to use, but not for every. And you are right, Vlado, that sometimes I would even have problems to kind of like imagine replacement, even though you know, I don't work as an activist. I don't work that often, but even in academia, for example, and this is kind of like a related issue, but it's not the same, but it's still related, is like gender sensitive language. I'm not saying gender correct, because I don't believe in gender correct, but gender sensitive language, you know. And even sometimes there, for example, at my faculty, we have more female students than male students. Despite of that fact, most of our documents are still in generic masculine, which basically calls students as men, you know, even though that's not factually true, you know. So it's sorry.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, these things can live next to each other, no? Even in policy documents, when you say MRK, you can put there next to MRK, like, don't use this in public speech. Here are some alternatives for you to use, because MRK, it's understood by everyone in policymaking, and it's a shortcut, obviously, but you can raise the attention of people that, you know, in public speeches, you could use other wording if you want to have a better effect. Okay, if there are no questions at this stage, I'm taking a pause here. If you have, you can still raise your hand, but if not, I think we will proceed to the breakout rooms for like 15 minutes. So we prepared 3 topics for you. Each topic will be led by one of the colleagues from Milan Šimečka Foundation, Veronica, Zuza, or Andre. And now Dia will tell you how it happens and what kind of breakout rooms we have for you. Or is it Teresa or someone?
Yeah, I can kindly ask Zuza as well to just describe what are the different rooms about. And maybe as well said, if you can, who from Milan Šimečka Foundation will be in which room.
Yeah, thank you. The first topic, so first of all, I would like to mention that in our research, we responded to the Slovak reality, and we responded to the needs of many mayors who were unable to gain public support for so-called Roma project. And so, you know, maybe some examples are too trivial for you, but it is real, this reality, and maybe the Slovak condition. And the first topic is how to communicate inclusive policies at the local level. And we wonder, how are your experiences? What do you usually use when you try to pursue someone for inclusive politics or some inclusive solution? Do you usually use the facts or some stories or some case studies? We are wondering what is most effective for your work, for example. That's the topic 1, and it will discussed by Veronica and you. The topic number 2 focused on the special arguments for ECD or other services, and maybe you will discuss about arguments for implementation of ECD service in the local level. So maybe you can imagine that you are the mayors who are expected to pursue local public to improve some politics of to implement some service. And it is the topic led by Andre. And And the last one is the thinking about capacity of ECD services or other services at local level to be communicated as the services for all, not only for the MRK or the Roma. And how do you see these possibilities?
This is how much time we had. Obviously, if you want to continue the conversation, either with us, Places to Grow people, or with people you had the chat in your room, you can contact Teresa, who was and is responsible for organizing this event. Thank you very much, Teresa. Everything goes very well so far. Teresa will share her email address. So if you need a contact of someone that you've met here, you want to continue the conversation, you want to know more about Places to Grow, please contact Teresa and she will direct you or help you. Okay, we have like 10-ish minutes left. So if you could just switch on your cameras for this last session so we can see everyone. And if I can ask the Veronica, Zuzá, and Andrei to provide a very brief, short summary of what happened in your room. Any interesting, insightful things to share, that would be very much appreciated. So maybe in this order, Veronica, Zuzá, and Andrei.
Yes, we had a really interesting sharing on the topic of communication of inclusive practices on local level. And one of those, the ways that proved from the experience of our partners in the conversation was confrontation and pointing at and shaming and blaming. You're not doing enough, you're doing it all wrong, etc. Turned out not to be working, not a surprise. So confrontation as one way, yet not very successful. And then the alternative strategies that they used was finding this common ground that Andrei was talking about in the very beginning. Basically coming down to a specific values that they hold dear, like for example, the well-being of the child, or this is your role and you're good at this, this is my role, I'm good at this, and let's work together. It was also interesting because we had in the group, we had not only people who are working with the Roma communities or people with the Roma background, but also people working with sort of gender and LGBTQI people who affiliate with these groups. And so we were talking also about the fact that, for example, in the LGBTQI, they don't use the concept of communities as it is a concept that's transposed from the US context, and it does not quite work, and people do not recognize themselves and identify as a community, apart from what Andrei was saying, that we need to basically rehumanize the language and be more person centric in our language. So it's yet another argument why we should not use the community term when talking about the groups of people. We also had people who work in media, and we talked a lot about that. Bringing personal, concrete stories works. Like, for example, a mom who does this and this was the fate, etc., or a human rights defender who this was the track record, etc. So through these very concrete stories, bring the emotion, but then back it up with evidence-based argumentation. What change will it bring to your community? What evidence suggests that it works? to be, so that you are more inclusive in your communication, and it brings you in the end the fruits of the labor that you actually need for the whole community to work. Also, there was a notion of sort of expanding the definition. If there is a commonly used word, like for example maybe MRK, or in their case it was the notion of gender, and please Apollonia help me, gender-based budgeting, and the topic in Slovakia is very politicized, and it's very strictly talked about. Basically, you know, when you talk about gender sensitive budgeting, you usually think about, okay, how does it impact women who have children, but it's much broader. So also in the subject of when you're talking about, for example, MRK, or you may wanna, with your communication, establish a new word that's maybe more encompassing more or larger aspects. Sorry that I took that long, but it was very, very interesting discussion group.
I'm really happy to hear it, and thank you for bringing such things as gender-based budgeting that just opens up another 90 minutes of discussion that we don't have. Thank you very much, Veronica, for doing this. Okay, Zuza, you're next to summarize your room.
Yeah, the time was really short for us, and I failed as a facilitator because Milan Zbožil, the special guest from regional municipality, haven't any words in our discussion. I'm sorry, Milan. Of course, because of some technical problems. So we discussed that accessibility of services and inclusion of services don't always match. And this is the way why the pro-Roma services are always segregated in Slovakia. So because of capacity of different worldviews and different context in the villages and in the conditions of villages. Bea mentioned the Hungary example where they tried to promote the ECD topic as the general topic for all, but the Shoshana's experiences from the field is that it's very difficult to communicate and to design the ECD service like service for all, not only for Roma families. So the idea that OMAMA will provide some kind of service in a non-Roma families in need is very beautiful, but doesn't real maybe in this time in Slovakia and in this place. So.
Right. Thank you very much, Zuza, for summarizing your room. And Andrei?
Okay, so we were a very small group, so our summary probably won't take such a long time. It was me, Stano, and Vlado, Matej, and what we discussed was, first of all, is this political infrastructure and structure actually which exists in these local communities. So that sometimes certain policies which are supposed to help people who are in need of such help, that if there is, for example, not a mayor who is at least willing to consider this, that it's almost 100% doomed to failure, because you are really going almost against all odds. But then we also talk about the situation in which you have a mayor who thinks this might be a good idea, but this mayor, they still think that getting the support of the local representatives in the city council or so might be a problem. So again, I mean, this kind of like this political environment is really important, and it really kind of like conditions or structures the way we want to communicate about certain policies which we need help. So please add Stan or Vlado if I forgot to mention anything important. I mean, the time really flew by, so I think we needed more time to discuss.
It's a good thing that time flies. Yeah, Stan or Vlado, you want to add anything?
Yeah, maybe I would highlight one thing that I've heard from Vlado, and I liked it a lot. And that's the issue of like voluntary participation. And he used the example of social services. Like once we establish early childhood development support as a service, then basically still there will be this voluntary aspect of it, because the families need to apply for it and then they can be provided with the support. So we will be able to communicate that it's not that we push them to do that, but there is this offer and they applied. So there is immediately this voluntary aspect of it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. And with this, we arrived to the end of this event. Thank you very much for coming. And I would like to do a small experiment. If you can help me with that, if you, all of you, everyone could switch on your camera and unmute yourself, everyone, if you can do it for me. Yeah, and I would like to give a big applause to Milan Šimečka Foundation, to Zuzá, Veronica, and Andrei. Thank you very much. Oh, it sounds terrible, but it's nice. And also I would like to thank Teresa for organizing today's peer learning event. Thank you very much, Teresa. Okay.
And of course we thank for the opportunity, as we said in the 3 words. We believe that talking about this is very important, and thank you for the platform and the international audience that had heard it.
Thank you, Veronica. Have a good day. If you have any questions, comments, need of contacts, you can email Teresa through the email address she shared in the comment section. And see you next time. We have our next meeting, next peer learning event. When, Dia?
On 7th of March at 9 a.m.
Yes. So we will post on our social media to let you know about the next event and the topic. We have already 2 topics competing for the place. So a lot of things are going on. So we'll see you there, hopefully. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.